over the indictments of two Republican congressmen who are big Trump supporters. Joining us now to talk about all of this is Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He serves on the Judiciary Committee that is holding today's hearing. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Allison. Great to be on with you again.
Great to have you on. So let me read to you the first portion of the president's tweet that we are all talking about this morning. Here it is. Two long-running Obama-era investigations of two very popular Republican congressmen were brought to a well-publicized charge just ahead of the midterms by the Jeff Sessions Justice Department. Two easy wins now in doubt because there is not enough time. Good job, Jeff. Senator, we just heard from our own Jeff Toobin, great legal mind, as you know, who said that he thinks that this is an impeachable offense. Do you agree?
Well, Allison, those tweets are wrong on the law and wrong on the facts. As Jeffrey Toobin was just saying, these aren't long-running Obama-era investigations. These are investigations done by career prosecutors of the Department of Justice, which is supposed to be independent of partisan politics. And the president's wrong on the law. He is dragging the Department of Justice off its long-standing perch as the gold standard for prosecution in the world, as something that's been an independent of presidential influence agency for so long. And these aren't just two popular Republicans. These are, as you said in your last segment, the first two Republican congressmen who endorsed President Trump. And they've been investigated and indicted on garden variety criminal activity by congressmen, insider trading in the case of Chris Collins, and stealing from his campaign funds to benefit his family in the case of Duncan Hunter Jr. And that President Trump continues to insist in seeing the Department of Justice as his own personal arm to settle political scores or advance his political allies is a genuine threat to our democracy. It's just another in a long series of profoundly concerning things this president has done. And I suspect this will end up being both brought up in the hearings with Judge Kavanaugh and further justifies questions that senators like myself have about why President Trump picked this particular judge to nominate to the Supreme Court at this time.
But before we get to those questions, and I do want to get there, Jeffrey Toobin suggests this is no ordinary tweet. Look, the president often has fact-free tweets, right. But this to Jeffrey Toobin crossed the line into, again, what he said he would consider an impeachable offense, that the president is meddling in, I mean, this is how he sees it, in a Justice Department criminal investigation. I mean, you point out that the president doesn't draw any line, doesn't see a distinction between the branches of government. So just connect those dots for us. Do you think that that rises to the level of something impeachable?
Allison, as you know, in the structure of impeachment, senators end up being the jury. So I think rather than prejudging any particular charge, I'll simply say this is another outrageous act by the president that shows his complete lack of respect for the Department of Justice. He swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. So did Attorney General Sessions and everybody at the Department of Justice. They swore to uphold the Constitution, not to be the private law enforcement agency of the Trump organization. Let me move on to what I think is the most concerning question about Judge Kavanaugh. I've known Judge Kavanaugh since law school, known him or known of him. We went to the same law school. We clerked in the same courthouse. He's just a few years ahead of me. And what we'll see in today's hearing is evidence that he is a lovely man, that he's a nice husband and father, that he's got wonderful children and a great family, and that his neighbors and clerks like him. And that's wonderful, but that's not the point. The point is that as a judge, as a lawyer, as a participant, a partisan participant in some of the greatest partisan battles of our lifetime, from the Judge Starr investigation of the Clinton presidency to the Bush v. Gore recount, he is someone who has staked out positions at the far end of the judicial mainstream in America. And on the particular question of whether the president can or should be able to fire a special counsel at will, whether he can refuse to obey a subpoena for evidence, Judge Kavanaugh has been very clear in law review articles, in speeches, and in opinions as a D.C. Circuit judge. I'm going to press him on whether he still holds those opinions and whether that might have been the reason that he got added to the list of judges that were ultimately put forward to President Trump, and why he might have been chosen by President Trump as a nominee for the Supreme Court.
Meaning that it is clear to you that Judge Kavanaugh does not believe a sitting president can be indicted or subpoenaed or even investigated. You're basing that on his 2009 Minnesota law review.
Not yes, but many others. He has spoken and written about this topic over 20 years. And as I'm sure you know, Allison, there's a landmark Supreme Court case that's 20 years old, Morrison v. Olson, and Judge Kavanaugh has repeatedly called it out as the one case that he wants to overturn, the one case that Justice Rehnquist wrote that he strongly disagrees with, the one case where he has repeatedly cited Scalia's lone dissent. In fact, he cited it 20 times. And in a case just last year, he disagreed with his own circuit court, the D.C. Circuit Court, and obviously he disagreed with the Supreme Court. The question whether or not a Supreme Court justice will overturn settled precedent is central to these confirmation hearings, and I think it's pretty clear exactly what precedent Judge Kavanaugh, if he becomes Justice Kavanaugh, will be gunning for from his first day.
Well, Senator, I can tell you what he's going to say because we have a little preview of his comments right here. I mean, these excerpts have just been released. So here's what he's going to say. A good judge must be an umpire, a neutral and impartial arbiter who favors no litigant or policy. I don't decide cases based on personal or policy preferences. I am not a pro-plaintiff or pro-defendant judge. I am not a pro-prosecution or pro-defense judge. I am a pro-law judge. I mean, he's going to say all the right things, you know, all the things that you would want him to say. And so how are you going to get him to answer that definitively, your burning questions?
It will be very difficult to get him to answer in front of us in this confirmation hearing process those questions definitively. But I'll give you 2 points that I think are relevant here. Now, Justice Gorsuch last year sat before us in the same confirmation process and cited his own book on precedent, a book which Judge Kavanaugh helped co-write. And yet Justice Gorsuch has in this last year voted on 5 occasions to overturn long-settled precedent. Since yesterday was Labor Day, I'll give you one key example. In the Janus case, a new conservative majority on this court overturned a 40-year-old precedent, delivering a gut punch to public unions. So I don't believe a candidate who comes in front of us, a nominee, who says, well, I respect precedent, I'm an umpire, given my very recent experience with now Justice Gorsuch. Second, we don't have to guess what his views are on this. He's spoken about it, he's written about it, he's picked out this particular case as one in a speech he gave in 2016, that of all the cases in American constitutional history, it was the one that he said he wanted to overturn. So I'll be challenging him to speak to his own record, something that is clearly legitimate for me to ask him about. What did you mean, Judge Kavanaugh, when you said this case must be overturned? Why? And it goes directly to his view of the scope and reach of the presidency and the idea that the president has to be able to fire at will and to refuse to obey orders from any prosecutor.
Okay, well, we will be watching and very interested in those answers. Senator Chris Coons, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you, Allison.
John.
2 journalists from Reuters say they were just doing